Jim Harbaugh is finally getting the respect he deserves. C.J. Stroud still proving that he is Charmin soft, and the Big Ten and its media negotiations prove that they have something of a downside on this Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Wednesday. Very confused about the day, as usual. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I am your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. We've got a couple topics to get to today. Again, thank you for everyone whose comments I saw. I didn't delve heavily into the into the comments with the Monday episode, but I got a lot of really good stuff. So if you haven't checked out the Monday episode, go back and check it out. So today we are going to get into Jim Harbaugh being named the number 4 coach in the country by my good friend Bill Bender over at Sporting News. That's one spot up from, I believe it was ESPN that had him at number 5 entering 2023. Jim Harbaugh was number 9 last year, and now he's number 4 behind only Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, and Dabo Swinney. That means, because you look at like Jimbo Fisher, I think was 14th in the country. James Franklin was 13th. Kirk Ferentz, I believe, was 19th. And PJ Fleck was 21st. So he's getting obviously the most respect in the Big Ten. But when it comes to those that are the big coaches in the conference, or not in the conference, in the country, the 3 ahead of him are guys who won national championships. So it puts him right below that tier. And after the last 2 years, I do think it is well deserved. But it's not just the last 2 years. Considering Jim Harbaugh was spoken of with such disdain across college football, as if he hadn't had a long track history, right? Because it's more than just what he's done at Michigan. Number one, you have to look at what he has done at Michigan, what Michigan was when he took over. A lot of these people that have been really just kind of down on Jim Harbaugh throughout this his tenure in Ann Arbor are suddenly just quickly forgetting what Michigan was when he took over. He took over a 5-7 team, and I remember that offseason going into his first year, there was a lot of talk of like, listen, if you go 6-6, that's a success, given what this team is. Went 10-3. Now, certainly 10-3 the next year, giant disappointment. 9-4 or whatever, 8-5, I think it was actually 8-5 the next year in 2017. Even bigger disappointment. 10-3 the next year was a little bit more exciting, right? Like it's, it kind of, they won lost the first game, lost the last game, or last 2 games rather, but at least kind of got Michigan back on the right track, seemingly. No one thought that they were going to sweep the 3-game gauntlet, as they were calling it. And that's exactly what Jim Harbaugh did. The next year would have gone a lot differently if it wasn't for the injury at the quarterback position. But, you are what your team is. And 9-4 that year. That's where I got confused with 2017. Then obviously 2-4, 11 or 12-2, and then 13-1. So, like I've talked about for a long time, he's on a similar path and similar track as Dabo, right? Dabo took about 7 years before he finally got Clemson from just being a decent team, or it went from being a joke. Actually, Clemsoning was a joke. It was the one of the big inside jokes in college football of they're going to find a way to screw it up, right? They went from that to being a multiple national champion, but it took several years for him to get them there. Jim Harbaugh's entering year 9, so it's maybe taking a little bit longer, but he has a bigger big bad in the conference in Ohio State that Clemson, yes, they had to fend with Florida State, but it wasn't like Florida State, despite its national championship under Jimbo Fisher, it wasn't like it was a perennial powerhouse either, right? Like Florida State was kind of okay, right? Like it was just all right. And then suddenly it came up under Jameis, and then Clemson took over and went from there, right? So it wasn't like Florida State they hadn't had the track record that Ohio State had, for instance. But you keep in mind what Michigan was when Jim Harbaugh took over. It was a 5-7 team. It was 7-5 the year before, and 2 years removed from 11-2. It was a program on the decline, and it got so bad that it couldn't win a bowl game, despite having the type of talent that was able to I shouldn't say win a bowl game. They still can't win a bowl game, annoyingly, but it couldn't get to a bowl game, despite the talent that got you to 10-3 2 straight years. So there's that. But then people also seem to be quick to forget what he did not only in the NFL. Obviously, the NFL hasn't forgotten since it's come calling every year, except for really one. But they forget what he did at Stanford, because he took a Stanford team that had won one game and turned it into a BCS level program, right? Went to the Orange Bowl, won an Orange Bowl. So it is incumbent upon Jim Harbaugh to take that next step, right? The next step is getting back to the college football playoff, winning at least one of those games. If you win a national championship, you might as well elevate yourself into that top 3 conversation. No, you're not going to be bigger than Nick Saban. You're going to have to win probably 5 or 6 in the next 7 years. But you can at least get yourself in that conversation. Win 2 in a row, suddenly you're on the same footing as Kirby Smart, who earned a lot of disdain on this program as someone who grew up being just a slight Georgia fan. I don't even think I watched any games. It was just like I liked Georgia because that was the in-state team for where I spent my summers. And I didn't like Georgia Tech. But Jim Harbaugh finally getting that credit. And we look at Ryan Day, he's number 5. I still think that's maybe too high, because Jim Harbaugh wasn't lying when he said some people are born on third base and think they hit a triple. Ryan Day has done a great job with the talent that he inherited, and he's done a good job of continuing to recruit top-end talent. But what has he really done outside of that? Ohio State fans love to come on and say 2014 national championship. That was 9 years ago, guys. Right? So that wasn't exactly recent. And that was under Urban. I think that Ryan Day is certainly a good coach. He's certainly a good recruiter. I don't know if he's number 5. If he loses to Jim Harbaugh again, certainly that will help Jim Harbaugh rise in the ranks, and certainly that'll push Ryan Day that much more down. So again, we're starting to see more and more of Jim Harbaugh ranked as the top coach in the conference. And given that he and James Franklin were kind of pegged together for quite some time, it's really refreshing to see that finally getting some credit where credit is due. All right, we are going to move on. I want to talk about some CJ Stroud comments that made their way into The Athletic. I think they're hilarious, and we will get to that here in just one moment. Before we do that, if you want to get into the comfort kingdom, then guess what? I've got just the thing for you, especially with this weather starting to get warmer. Then you're going to want to go and try Birddogs. Birddogs is revolutionizing comfort when it comes to your pants and your shorts. Whether you're looking for something dressy for the gym or for going out to the lake this summer or anything in between, you can go to Birddogs. They've got everything you want. So you'll look and feel better while wearing Birddogs. They allow you the versatility of going from the beach or to the golf course, right to dinner, or to your next meeting. You've got all kinds of options. Take my guy, Bert Kreischer, the machine. He wakes up at his lake house, he goes for a swim, smokes a cigar, grills, chills with his family, all in his summer shorts. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege, enter the promo code LockedOnCollege, and they'll throw in a free tumbler that's Yeti style with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege with the promo code LockedOnCollege. All right, I don't know if CJ Stroud could embarrass himself anymore. I know Ohio State fans still like him, and God bless them for it. He went 0-2 in his tenure against Michigan. He did pick Ohio State over Michigan. Michigan was recruiting him seemingly for much longer. I remember him being at that basketball game. I think he got a small chant going. That was the J.D. Johnson year. 2019, when J.D. Johnson was the 4-star quarterback committed. He had to medically retire, and so Michigan had to late in it shift gears. I remember that day that happened. It was mid to late October. I was about to go see a stunning band called Starset in concert, and I was getting dinner beforehand when that news hit. So it was at that point in the year where it was chilly, right? It was cold, and you don't want to have to recruit your quarterback for the year at that point. Michigan tried to recruit C.J. Stroud. Ohio State came swooping in late, committed to Ohio State, worked out mostly well for them except for in the rivalry. And that's certainly not his fault. He played excellent in the 2021 loss. He didn't play quite as excellent in the 2022 loss to Michigan. But if you remember, coming out of 2021, Ohio State had all kinds of excuses, right? C.J. Stroud had the flu. A bunch of players had the flu. Oh, it was chilly outside. As if Michigan didn't have to play in the same weather, and acting like Columbus is some tropical destination comparatively, right? Like I think I would give them a little more credence even if they were in Kentucky, which again isn't that different. Tennessee maybe even isn't that different. I remember driving down. I decided to drive down to the Peach Bowl in 2018. Still struggling with my ability to fly, which has gotten significantly better, thankfully. Thank God. But I drove down, and it was exactly 30, I think it was like 34 degrees when I left my home in Holly, Michigan at the time. And it stayed exactly 34 degrees all the way until I got to Chattanooga, when suddenly it warmed up. Like all through the mountains, all through, the flatlands, wherever I was, it was 34 degrees in Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee. So it's not even that much different. But think about Ohio. The first time I ever went to Columbus, Ohio was in it would have been 2012, I believe. Went to visit my friend Brian, who I worked with at United Talent Agency, and it was blizzard conditions from here down to there. The night that I got there, right? Like it was like a foot of snow on the ground. So it's not like it's immune from that. This was January. It's not immune from that whatsoever. But all the complaining about the weather and all of that. So I'm sure we all remember those excuses. Those got decimated in 2022 when Michigan did the same thing, but even worse, in perfectly sunny skies. Didn't really matter that your passing game still didn't work if you're Ohio State. But C.J. Stroud. So what he did is he went to he decided to speak to The Athletic. They asked a bunch of quarterbacks a bunch of questions, right, about some of the newly drafted quarterbacks. So like him and Dorian Thompson-Robinson and all kinds of guys, what their thoughts are about the NFL, and like what players are you looking forward to jersey swap with and stuff like that. So then they got asked a question of what if you have one thing that you would change about the NFL, what would it be? CJ Stroud had two. So one of them, I'll read the quote in a second, but I'll start here. And two, more cool uniforms. I don't think that the uniforms are meant to be so generic. Tradition is fine, but I think it would make the game more fun. Okay, fine. That's a very modern college football, or not even college football, but modern player type thought. And certainly the NFL is modernized in a lot of ways. The uniforms look worlds different now than they did when I was growing up, or even 15, 20 years ago, when it was still kind of, might have had some redesigns. The Philadelphia Eagles and Tampa Bay Buccaneers look a lot different than when I was growing up. But now even, outside of the Packers or the Steelers, I mean, like the Lions uniform looks worlds different, But so here's the other thing he said, and this is what we're getting to. I would say that everybody has to have a dome if you're in a cold area, continuing on after his uniform thing. Every cold game in a dome. But it's okay. You get used to it. Actually, I love playing in the cold, but it's love-hate. I would guess that line of delineation between love and hate for C.J. Stroud, it probably falls squarely on the line of one game that he hates. Right? Probably one. And that one happened to happen in Ann Arbor on November 27th in 2021. Because I'm sure that if he went out and thrived, which, I mean, he actually, again, he played very well. But if he would have thrived and they would have, The score would have been reversed, 42-27. He'd be like, listen, that's just part of the game. You got to play. You got to play out in the cold. You got to play through the elements. You got to play when you got the flu, all of that. And, that just speaks of our perseverance, our team, and our grit. But that's not what he's saying, of course, because it just, again, it reads as sour grapes. If like you have 2 losses in conference, right? 3 overall in regular season play and 4 overall total. 1 was in a dome. And then in the Peach Bowl, 2 of them were at home. 1 was in September against Oregon. 1 of them was on a beautiful 50-something degree day in Columbus, Ohio, in which I was wearing a hoodie, and that was pretty much it. And then the other, there was 1 cold game that you can remember from the C.J. Stroud era, and it was a loss to Michigan in Ann Arbor. So if I'm a Houston Texans fan, because obviously he was drafted by the Houston Texans, he's going to be playing in a dome in a warm weather area. And I would look at what his future schedule is going to be, what Houston's future schedule is going to be. And I would just essentially say, this is a loss, this is a win, right? You can kind of tell, right? But based off of what he is not going to be capable of playing in. So let's take a look at the Houston Texans schedule. It's mostly pretty easy here. But he has to play. So we're looking at the cold weather months. He doesn't leave the South really all regular season. He's in the South the entirety. And then suddenly on November 12th, he has to go play in Cincinnati in an open air stadium. Now that's probably not that much different than Columbus, right? It's like an hour and a half from Columbus or so. But, he does have to contend with Dax Hill and DJ Turner, guys who maybe had a little success against him. December 10th, he has to go to East Rutherford, New Jersey to play the Jets. And who knows what the next week against the Titans, it's probably not going to be that cold. So he's got 2, there's 2 games there that you can sit there and say, okay, one's kind of in the college football season-ish, and it's in the area that he played in, so maybe it's not that bad. But I can go ahead and circle that December 10th game against the Jets and say he's probably going to have a bad game. Because it's clearly, if that is your thought, you mentally you aren't, even if you can say, I have a love-hate relationship with it. All right, I'm sorry, you don't love it. You're not ready for it. You just aren't in the mindset to be able to tackle that the way that an NFL player, he has to embrace it. And clearly, no Tom Brady, who had to play all of his games in open air Foxborough, All right, let's continue on. Some interesting scheduling news. Doesn't involve Michigan, but it is certainly interesting nonetheless. Let's get to that here in just a moment. All right, so announced at noon, exactly an hour ago from right now. It was announced. We already knew that this was going to be a night game on the eve of the game. The day after Thanksgiving, Black Friday, we already knew that Penn State at Michigan State was going to likely be a night game on NBC and Peacock. Looks like it'll probably be simulcast on both, but just because the graphic had both NBC and Peacock logos, I don't know exactly if it's one or the other, but I would imagine it's going to be on NBC. And that's a pretty big game. I mean, despite what Michigan State may or may not be, that's a pretty enticing game for that night. I won't have to travel that night, so that's fun. But I always, it's like going to Columbus. Sometimes it's like trying to find, I was in my hotel last year and I was trying to watch. I think it was Clemson, North Carolina. I think was that last game, and it was North Carolina and somebody. And I just remember trying to tune into that, and I couldn't get it. I had to go somewhere, and I was running around doing a bunch of other stuff in Columbus. But nonetheless, it's an intriguing game in a way, right? And now it's not played at 3:30 after the Michigan Ohio State game. But what's interesting is that they took away a home game from Michigan State, which I'm sure they had to agree to, which is also bizarre. So they are playing the game at Ford Field, neutral site, a good, 80 miles away from East Lansing. To me, this is a catastrophe for Michigan State, right? Like, it's one thing if it was right down the road. If like there was the domed stadium that was in Lansing that could house you or has a similar capacity or something like that, or even if they had the same proximity that Michigan has to Detroit, then that would, I think, be a little bit more sensical. But and I understand there's probably more overall just because of the population density of this area. There's probably more Michigan State fans generally in Metro Detroit. But what this does is it's like a neutral site game in a lot of ways. And then you took away a home game, what was supposed to be senior day, last regular season game. I believe that means that I saw on Twitter that senior day, then the last game for the seniors at Spartan Stadium is like November 6th, which is nuts, right? I guess, or November 4th or whatever. I don't remember exactly have my dates memorized for what week's which, but it's just weird. And to me, that encourages a lot more Penn State fans to come, because even though it might be hostile, you might also get more casuals just being like, you know what, it's Black Friday, I want to go see some football, so I'm going to go see some football up at Ford Field before I go to the game in Ann Arbor or whatever. And certainly there will probably be more people who would want Penn State to survive, thrive, and all of that in that era, unless they're in a fight with Michigan. So I don't know. It's just a weird thing. I don't hate this NBC flex as long as Michigan doesn't get flexed into a late season game. But hey, if it was CJ Stroud, if CJ Stroud was playing for Penn State, he would be thrilled, right? Playing inside end of November. I understand it's cold, all of that. But at the same time, it's like if Buffalo can have like January playoff games, then I don't really see a big issue in having a November night game, right? Like I wouldn't like it. I would complain a lot, but I mean, heck, I bought a ridiculously warm jacket, listed as the warmest jacket you can get. I was sweating in it during the Illinois game last year. Just wearing a t-shirt underneath because I was prepared for it. Different playing in it, certainly, but if you're going to play in the NFL, there's going to be a lot of games that, playoffs in Green Bay, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, New England. Guess what? You're going to play in some cold weather in 2 months later, potentially, than what that is when it's really, really cold. So I don't know. I just think the whole thing is bizarre. I think it's kind of cool though too, like just changing things up from how they've been. I'm certainly not rushing in to want any more night games late in the season. I don't really like night games in general, just because it's a more of a hassle as a reporter, and certainly as a photographer, it creates other issues. But you know what? If you're gonna have them, all right, let's do it. Let's do it that late. It's just a weird scenario. All right, that's all I got for you today. I have not put the call out as of me saying this, but we will have the mailbag on Thursday. That is the plan. We're going to try to do both a Friday and a Saturday episode. That is the hope. That is the goal. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you again soon. Peace.